Welcome everybody, it's John Bernakovich with All Points Design, allpointsdesign.ca, and today we're talking about the Oregon State University Permaculture Design Pro course. This is the office hours for that course, specifically the winter and spring 2022 offering, and we are on office hour 9. So welcome to everybody who had the time to show up today. Couple of questions that folks have sent in. We're just going to pop on over to the Q&A doc. So one of the things that folks have talked a lot about, and understandably, it's getting good data. And when we look at data, it's hard to find good data. And so sometimes we have to go and develop that data. So the question here is, you gave some useful feedback on getting good contour maps in your last video. It seems like the best way to assure good maps on my own is to get a drone and use that high quality image to get a DEM, digital elevation model to send to a third-party GIS whiz. So another way that doesn't require the cost of a drone, or would you say this is a critical piece of startup equipment for a design business? What other startup equipment would you say is crucial to making the leap into professional level design and consulting? So that's two questions. We're going to split that up. Yeah, so I've talked about this a few times before. Basically, my experience is it's a lot easier to go and see if anybody else has developed that data. And so I would say maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 jobs doesn't have pre-existing data that I have to go and find. For those that do have the data, then you work with a GIS specialist, or if you want to become a GIS specialist, for our intents and purposes, I do recommend the QGIS course through the agrarians.org. So is there a way to do that doesn't require the cost of a drone, or would you say this is a critical piece of startup equipment? I wouldn't say it's critical at all. I went without this for a long period of time. I currently don't have a drone. I have in the past. I sold it because I wanted to be ready for whatever the next upgrade in technology was. And truthfully, at this point, I found a few folks who are running drones who can run this service for me for under $500. And I'm more than happy to pay them for that. That is an easy and quick way to do it. Basically, without exception, I rather pay somebody and have them take on the depreciation of their equipment, and this works. This works for pretty much everything. You know, unless you're using it every single day, I don't recommend buying equipment. Chainsaw is probably the only thing I currently own as a piece of equipment. So not critical, can be useful at times, but not critical. What other startup equipment would you say is crucial to making the leap into professional level design and consulting? So when you take a look at the idea of outsourcing business elements, and the fact that permaculture and regenerative land design is so much about what happens in between your ears, the climate of the mind, there's very little that's essential. Especially if you're working with handmade drawn maps. So if you're going a digital drawn way, if you're trying to draw digitally, then I would say having the program and the understanding of that program to create professional level designs and export that would be crucial. If you're not, and I did this for years, so the first 3 to 4 years, I actively used people who were renderers, and so they would render my design. They would take what I had spent hours, days, sometimes months thinking about designing. And sometimes it was as simple as pencil and paper, and then translating that into a digital design. And I had a mentor years ago say that if it's drawn in pencil, it's a good idea. But for a client, if it's drawn on computer for some reason, it becomes a reality. And I've kept to that largely. But these days, what I do is I basically tell clients that I work in Google Earth Pro and can create an active working file that they can access. And then if I need to, I'll do detailed design on layout. So if I have an area roughed in saying, well, this will be a silviculture pasture, then what I'll do is I'll detail out what that silviculture will look like in a very simple and easy laid out form. A colleague of mine, Neil Bertrando, who's in the for-credit side of this course, taught me years ago that he'd much rather have people spend money on him putting the design into place instead of spending money on a pretty picture. And he introduced me to the world of designing on PowerPoint, which in an indirect, circuitous way led to the Google Slides template. And truthfully, the Google Slides template has a lot more robustness when it comes to rendering and physical design than some of the designs he showed me. But I love that. I love that he was telling his clients, listen, you can either pay me or somebody else to make a pretty picture, or you can have a simplistic schematic that you can then go and install. And so I think, especially in this work, people get obsessed with the output. Designers get obsessed with the output of what their designs look like, but a lot of that can be mitigated by just front loading the expectations of your clients and letting them know, I'd much rather you spend money on the design. So I design in a very simplistic way. If you want a beautiful picture, and you can show them examples. I had a client years ago that wanted a 3D render. And so I hired a gentleman to do a 3D render of the design. That's what they want, that's fine. But basically I have a standard of what I will produce. And then if they want anything above that, great, they can pay for it. I like to draw. I like to do especially perspective renders. I really enjoy it, but it's time. So if they want that, that's fine. And if they don't, then great. A lot of the people who are into this type of work in particular would like something that they can get into the ground. And a lot of them have an element of DIY. But for those that don't, and if you want to go at that sort of commercial level, then I would say some sort of way to professionally produce your designs, either through something like AutoCAD or something like the Adobe Suite, or more professional vector-based GIS referenced programs like Landscape Architect or Vectorworks, all of which carry thousands of dollars of fees. Then go to. But I also, because of the way that I've built businesses in the past, I like to bootstrap until I need something. And then I like to go out and get it after I've had a lot of experience working with that tool or that process, or speaking to people who work with that. At this point, I find a computer that will run the programs that I need is important. I like a separate monitor because I like spreading things out. I personally have an iPad, which I just recently upgraded from a 2017 to a recent, I think it was a 2021 or 2022, whatever the latest and greatest was. I spent a lot of time not wanting to upgrade, but that old pencil was terrible. So it was time to upgrade. But the 2018s are fantastic. It's the same form factor, the same layout. You can get them used for somewhere between $400 and $500 if you're looking for the 11-inch. And you can also go just for the straight 9.7-inch. I have looked into Android tablets. They just don't have the suite of software I like to use. And again, I like to use Morpholio Trace. I like to use Concepts. I like to use Procreate. Those are the apps I like to use. So other elements, I do have Transit, or also called a dumpy level, with a storyboard, because I have taken hand measurements, and I've created maps under sort of 3 acres, and I've done it in person. I've surveyed land. I would say that I would do it again if I needed to. I also like walking around with a storyboard and taking measurements. It really depends on who you are as a person. I love mapping. It's something that really excites me. So for me, that's really important. I would say a hand level has been hand optic level has been phenomenal for me. I've really enjoyed having that. I've really enjoyed having a mobile device, because when I started, the mobile devices that we have today didn't have the same capacity. I also really like using my iPad in situ. I was asked to go and do a greenhouse consult of a family friend on my way to visit family. And with the iPad, I was able to take photos in situ and draw exactly what it was I was thinking. And so they could, in real time, see where I was placing the greenhouse, and in real time where I was placing the beds and what they would look like. And that's been phenomenal. I would say, if anything, that's probably been my favorite tool to use in the process. On that note, for ground truthing a keyline design that I've made on a map, what would you recommend the process look like? Laser level GPS unit flags? Yeah, almost exactly, actually. You can use a dumpy level, you can use a water level, but if you either have a laser level, or if you have a high degree GPS unit. And the high degree GPS unit that was recommended to me, which is about to be ordered for me after years of lauding it, is called the Bad Elf Surveyor. It's about $649 USD. And basically it's a sub-meter accurate GPS device, and all GPSs usually at a prosumer consumer level have about that accuracy, but it has a Bluetooth ability to then interface with your phone, and your phone can then use that as its location finding device, if you will. So everything on your phone, and the apps we've talked about before is GPS Kit for iOS and Gaia GPS for Android, then becomes sub-meter accuracy, which is pretty phenomenal. So what I would do in layout, if I don't have reference points, is I would find the elevation marker, and then I would set contour. So basically I would either set up a laser level. Normally what I would do, and I don't own one, I would rent one. They're cheapest chips and really easy to get. And then basically once you set up your laser level, you're basically setting a level mark across the landscape. It's kind of like taking the ocean and making it totally flat wherever you set that element. And then working with a storyboard that has a receiver for that laser. And you will rue the day you did this, because the beep, 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 if you're laying out for an entire day or a weekend, will drive you insane. But it's quick. Basically that receiver you set up to the height that that contour is at, and then basically that then sets out your line. And so you can either set out the line and then do your spacing in between, or you can then set point by point with both elevation and spacing between either your, if you're going to create a bed, or if you're going to bring in a machinery, or if you've got an excavator driver or a tractor driver. And usually you're looking for a driver that respects flags. So these are drivers that can take a flag and pick it out and put it back. This is that level of precision you're looking for. You mentioned Brett Smith to send DEMS too, but also said you had some other contacts that do GIS work. Could you send them along? Yeah, I'm still evaluating them, and so cannot currently recommend them. But when and if I do, I'll let you know. More generally, I dabbled in consulting design gigs in my spare time for the past couple of years. And at least in my area, I've had a hard time figuring out what clientele are out there that can make a business like mine as a viable source of income. Folks I've encountered who've reached out to me have generally fallen into two categories. One, people with enough resources to afford design work for their property, but without interest in doing permaculture agroforestry. They confuse me for a landscaper or tree worker, despite clear advertisements towards what I actually offer. Or two, folks who are interested in a holistic design process but don't have the resources to afford my rates and are generally DIYers. Anyways, okay, so we're getting to the end of the course, and so now we're actually getting into how the heck do I make a business out of this, which is a great place to get to. So there's a couple of ways to go about this. First and foremost, my experience has been to strive and strain to make sure that your digital explanation of your work is as clear as possible. And sometimes you even actively tell people what you're not and what you are. So sometimes in that situation, it's I'm not a traditional landscaper. I'm not an arborist or a tree worker. I'm somebody who holistically takes a look at a landscape and understands the climatic influences, the water, the humidity, the heat, the thermal values, the degree days, the chill days, and brings in the conversation of what you want, your skills, your desires, your budget, but also takes a look at the regulatory landscape to understand what it is we might be able to do in this site for you. Generally, this is what my work looks like. And this is one of the most important things to do within this work, is to get a design in the ground, documented before, during, and after, and then continually go back for upgraded photos and updates. Because what we do is new, generally. There's very little in previous experiences in terms of landscape designers or regenerative land designers, which is what I fall into calling myself, even though people are like, oh, the permaculturalist is here. And I have to giggle because, if my carpenter that I've hired to come build my house comes in and he pulls out a hammer and I go, oh, the hammerist is here. It's very similar to me. It's a tool. It's a tool that I use. And even the carpenter isn't there. You don't hire him for his carpentry. You hire him to build you a home. And that's what we do. We build regenerative, abundant, diverse, and if necessary, profitable landscapes that get better year after year. That's my tagline. These are landscapes that acknowledge our state of being not only in the world, but also in their context. So it takes a while to get clear on that. And I used to run a regenerative business mentorship program, helping people to get clear on that and to create niche statements. But basically, a niche statement is I help these kind of people with these kind of problems create these kind of results. And sometimes you can put in there, I help these kinds of people with these kind of problems who feel this way about their problems create these kinds of results. Eventually, what you have to do, and it's a leap of faith, and one of the ways that you safeguard against that is you get a non-related job. You get a job that makes you indifferent to the jobs that come to you. And so in years past, we had a client within the regenerative business program, and they were having problems during winter being able to sustain themselves. And so basically we said, go get a job, go get something that is within your wheelhouse that will build your skills, right? Every job should be a learn or an earn potential, potentially both, or preferably both. At least that is my situation now. If it's not a learn and earn, I'm not interested. And then make yourself indifferent to the jobs that come to you. That's what he did. He went and picked up a nursery job, learned more about propagating and things of that nature. And I don't know what grand number of things, synergies came together to make him ready for it. But basically within 3 months, he had to cancel, or he had to quit his job because he had so much work. And that was the last time he had to take on separate work. And that was, oh man, that program was about 5 years ago. So I make this suggestion to farmers as well, make yourself indifferent. So that way, when amazing jobs come along, you can take them. And when somebody wants you to build a deck, you can tell them to pound sand. Because what you have to do is you have to build a reputation as being that person that does that thing. And then document it and show proof of purchase or proof of concept of what you do. And folks can get excited about that. So my experience has been to offer it that way. For those folks that can't afford the full guided process, I liken it to, this is a marketing example that we've used for a number of years. So when you go to an ice cream shop, you tend to want to sample things. You get a little pink spoon. And if we don't have pink spoons about our work, chances are we're not going to be attracting the wide enough net of the yes, maybes, and no's. And everybody who comes to our business is a yes, maybe, and no inherently, even before they meet us. We're either a good fit for them or we're not. And so basically what you need to do is you need to be handing out or being in front of enough people with enough pink spoons. So that way, when they come to your business and they go, yeah, I want exactly the flavor of ice cream you have. In fact, I want 2 scoops. In fact, I want a full tub. In fact, I want an ice cream sandwich. In fact, I want an ice cream cake. In fact, I want to learn how to make ice cream with you in your mentorship program. All of a sudden you have these tiered levels. And so for folks that are generally in the DIY conversation, they're at a lower tier of financial commitment, and thus they have a potential for lower commitment of your time. So this means you may want to run programs that are workshops. So something I did when I started was I ran monthly workshops that were introduction to permaculture. That's all they were. It was started off as an evening workshop, then a day workshop, then a 2-day workshop. And all I did was teach what permaculture was, because the main problem here is not a problem with the value of our work or what it can produce. It's that nobody knows what the heck we do. So that then created this pink spoon, which was usually a paid pink spoon. And I look at all workshops as paid interviews. So people are paying to interview me if they want to work with me. So if they are during the week, during the month, during whatever, but I would set a consistent schedule and continually do open workshops for people. Now, state of the world being what it is, these may be online workshops. They may be partners with other types of organizations like, when I started off, anybody who would let me speak, I would go to. So I went to the Lions Club. I went to the Rotary Club. I went to the Women's Institutes. I went to the garden clubs in my area. Anybody who was like, we want you to speak, I would go, because it was experience, it was practice. And I would build a talk. So this is a piece of marketing advice I was given years ago. you have to distill your work into a 45-minute talk. And I think this is the genius of TED Talks. You have to be so clear about what it is you do that you could give a 45-second talk or a 45-minute talk. You could scale up to 45 hours, 45 minutes, 45. You have to be able to scale that up and down. So that way you can go into the depth of what it is you do. But basically, everyone wants to know, how can this help me? So every one of your clients is on an island A, called the Isle of Woe. Now, the Isle of Woe is a bunch of people woeing about. They're upset, they're frustrated, they have problems. And as you come up to the Isle of Woe in your good ship, you have to say, people of the Isle of Woe, it is I on the good ship, my business, and I can take you to the Isle of Wow. I can take you to this amazing place where your woes are transformed into solutions, into wows. And it takes time and thought process and conversations to accurately understand and speak to the people who have the Isle of Woe and the people who want to achieve that Isle of Wow. So you have to understand the pain points of your clients. You have to understand the gain points of your clients, and you have to speak to them in such a way that they understand that. Generally, what I do after now 13 years of this is I make myself open for anywhere between 3 to 5 design jobs a year. I don't like stacking my jobs. So I've gotten to a place to where I get to take one design job and I don't have to have another job on deck. And I like to do it complete. I like to just focus on it. So after I finish that, then I move on to the next one. When I started, sometimes I'd have 6 or 7 jobs in process at any one time at a different state. So sometimes they were in information collection, sometimes they were in design, sometimes they were in installation collection or installation stage. But for me, I didn't like that. So I decided it was time to move down the line and just have this one element. But what I found is that because I like talking, and because I've been on a number of podcasts and still go on podcasts, I still get people asking them. Because I've built a name for myself, the majority of my work now comes from referrals of previous clients or from colleagues that are too busy. So colleagues will email me and they'll get an email and then they'll CC me saying, hey, I'm too busy right now, but Javin's great. I think you should chat with him. And that then brings it about. So what I'm saying is there's going to be the folks that will have the resources to do design and installation. That's great. And there'll be the ones who want to do DIY, and that's great. You just have to create systems to capture and store their interest in a way that works with where they're at in their lives. So this is one of the reasons why I created Regenerative Living, an online educational platform, because I wanted an open conversation where one person could go and get all of the information that I have spent 13 years gathering. So it's all in one place. And for a lot of the DIYers, that's what they do. Sometimes those DIYers will move themselves up into a guided client where I'm guiding them. And sometimes they just want to do it themselves for the rest of their lives. Sometimes they reach out and they say, hey, I just want an hour of your time. That's good too. But basically that all starts with knowing your niche. So I help these kind of clients with these kind of problems who feel this way about these problems, create these kind of results. And that's basically the Isle of Woe and the Isle of Wow, not to mention the journey they'll take with you. And sometimes the journey or your point of view, how you look at the world, is why people work with you. So because people know, usually if they come from a podcast, they know that I've dealt with mental health. They know that I've made businesses both conventionally and now alternatively. And that I see this world as not just unplugging in trees, but how do I develop a lifestyle with you that you love? That gets them excited. For folks that don't like that, they run away from me like the plague because they don't want that level of interaction with me. They want the one thing they want. They want a landscape. They want somebody to come in. They want somebody to come out. They want a more conventional, a more hygienic, and I don't use that word lovingly, relationship with their contractor. That's not me. That's not me at all. I like understanding my clients. I like my clients understanding me. It's how I want to be in this world. And if you haven't already, I would highly recommend reading Derick Sivers' Anything You Want. incredible book about how a musician turned programmer developed the world's first online CD music store, and realized that his business could be anything he wanted, but it was his version of utopia. So from the pricing structure to how he worked with his growing employee base and everything else, and when he finally exited the company, our businesses can be anything we want. It doesn't mean that there will be people who will want it, but it does mean that if we're going to take on a area of work that is so new and so specific and so out there, and is probably going to be a lot of work, that we best do it in such a way that it really is the thing that we want to do every single day. This can be done and said a bit more crassly, as a colleague of mine once said that entrepreneurship is and being your own boss is a poo sandwich, and you have to decide what kind of poo sandwich you want to eat every day, because there's always going to be something about it that's terrible. And it's true. There's aspects of this work that I think at the beginning of what I started was I disliked intently. But over time, I've basically given my expectations to my clients, and my clients know what they can expect. So they know what the design will look like. They know what the report will look like. They know the level of interaction they can receive from me. And instead of me thinking, what should I give them? I instead ask, how do I want to run the business? How do I want to present myself to them? How do I want to do everything? How do I want to take first payment? How do I want to take second payment? How do I want to take full payment? Years ago, I started offering a discount for full payment. And it was amazing how many people did it. It's a very simple business tool that I use to motivate my clients to continually answer my phone calls, because eventually clients' life gets busy and all the rest of it. And if they had already paid me, they were like, oh, no, we want to get back to him because we already have an investment. Whereas when I was doing deposits, and then I think I still have an option, 60% upfront, 30% halfway through, and 10% upon completion, the follow through of those clients compared to the full payment clients with full payment discount is night and day. It's night and day. It's like 95%, 5%. It's just what people will do when you're paid fully is remarkable. But also in this case, and I should make this point, I'm giving advice for somebody who wants to become world class at what they do. I'm not giving advice to somebody who wants to put in another fence. This is not about putting in another fence. This is about loving your work, putting your values into your work, and living your values. So none of this advice applies if you're thinking, I just want a side business and this is just something I'm going to do in my spare time. My approach to this has really been to be world class. If you were going to create a side business, I would pick a product like I do raised wicking garden beds that you only have to water once a month. And they come installed, and they come beautiful, and they come with greenhouse attachments. And here's the price per the 4 options you can have. You can have a 3 foot by 6, you can have a 3 foot by 9, or a 3 foot by 10. And here's the 1 or 2 options. I'll do galvanized steel, or I'll do wood. And here's how long they last. When I started, I began to offer specific products that people could buy, because it was an easy way for me to get in and then say, oh, that's interesting. What else are you doing on this landscape? So it was a nice way in to the site and a nice way into the client that helped them to bridge the gap between the conventional world and the unconventional world. That was what I did. But it really depends on what you want your business to be. And that's why I think the Anything You Want by Derick Sivers is so important, because you really have to think, okay, what do I want with my business? What do I want it to look like? What do I want it to be like? I've had students who have gone directly into rendering. They just loved rendering, so they created rendering and rendering conversations. I've had students who love installation and hate design work, and so they just created installation companies. One of my longtime mentors and friends, Brandon Bauer, he doesn't really like design. He doesn't like to put things down on paper. He doesn't like the time it takes him. Basically, he likes clients that knows what he does, will talk with them and go, great, I'll put in something beautiful and it'll be exactly what you want. And he's gotten to that place where people trust him enough that I would say a good portion of his work is like that. Similarly, when you take a look at colleagues of mine like Zach Weiss, Zach is Sepp Holzer's prodigy in North America, and I would actually say worldwide. Zach similarly has a day rate. He shows up on site. He's there to get the project done. He's there to look at everything. He's there to take it in. He's there to do a rough sketch. And then he's coming back within whatever his schedule is to put in the project. And so from beginning to end, he's putting in elements. He's putting in design work. If you like Zach's work, waterstories.com is his website, and he's currently going to be, very soon, he's going to be opening up what he's calling the Water Stories core curriculum. I haven't looked at it yet. I don't know what it's about, but if it's anything like what Zach does in the real world, should be pretty amazing. But in terms of starting out, I would say, or retooling your business, be very clear about what it is you want to do. Make sure your digital offering or explanation of that is very clear about what you do and what you don't do. And the reason for that is evaluating people takes a lot of time. Something I realized years ago is that I was spending a lot of time evaluating clients, or I wasn't spending a lot of time evaluating clients, and I was getting the wrong clients. I was getting clients who thought I was something else. So I have what's called a good fit call. And that good fit call is my sales call. But I ask a couple of questions. The first question I ask is, what's your situation that brought you to call me? Who's involved? Who are the family members? What's the land like? What are you like? What's motivating you? Things like that. I also, when they, from a logistics perspective, when they email me, they basically get an access to my online scheduler. I use Calendly, which is great. I like it. And they get access to a Google form, and that Google form has these questions listed, and they answer them on their own time, and then they re-answer them during the call, and I ask questions about them. The next question I ask is problem. Why are you coming to me? What is going to be different after you interact with me? So if we cross on the street and we meet and I have a lemonade stand, you come to me, you want that lemonade. After you walk by my lemonade stand, you have a lemonade. So what do you want after you've finished working with me? What's different in your life? What's changed? And in that situation, we start to get a sense of the pain points and the gain points. Then I ask a question which has been phenomenal in understanding if I'm eligible to help them, which is, what is the obstacle to solving your problem? Do I know how to solve that obstacle? And if I don't know how to solve the problem and don't know how to solve the obstacle, I'm not a good fit for them, and I'll send them onwards. Next, I ask them, what is the cost of that problem to date? Financial, emotional, physical. What is it costing you? If clients are not motivated, they're a bad client. They're not a client for me. They're not a good fit. I don't want an unmotivated client. I want a client that goes, yeah, I want this. This is what I need. I have to have this. Great. Because it's a process, and you're going to want them to be highly motivated. Finally, I ask them what their Isle of Wow looks like. What is the ideal outcome of our situation? We cross. What's that lemonade look like? And just had a conversation with a good fit call the other day, and they were like, I know my land, I know my watershed, I know the ponds and earthworks will all make sense. I know the fruit trees will produce. It was very clear. They knew what they wanted. After that, we have a couple of questions like, what has been your experience of working with consultants and contractors before? What are good ways? What are poor ways? What are positives and negatives? I ask them how they like feedback. Do they like it direct and compassionate, or do you have to beat around the bush a little bit more? I just like to know the level of intervention. Sometimes I have to give really hard truths to people. Sometimes I have to give them truths like, your house is rotted and you've got maybe 3 years before you're going to have to do something with it. So I want to know that, because I want to be able to tailor myself. Or again, your business being anything you want, you'll then want to know, do you want to take on that level of client care? And sometimes clients have different levels of care. Then I ask them about their timeline. What's their timeline they want to complete this? Is this today? Is this next week? Is this next year? Then I tell them, or then I ask them, do they think I'm a good fit for them? Because I'm about to tell them. So, from what you've heard thus far from our conversations, you've already gotten a sense of me. Do you think I'm a good fit for you? And because that good fit, if you go to allpointsdesign.ca and go under the good fit, which I think is under about, you'll see I've got a whole, are we a good fit for a land design? Are we a good fit for a life design conversation? So, and even on the contact page, it says, have you read the good fit? So the result of this is about 90 to 95% of people who actively reach out and call want to work with me. Doesn't mean we always work together. Sometimes I'm not available. Sometimes I don't think they're eligible. Sometimes they're not a good fit for me, for my personality, for what's going on, for what I'm interested in. But that then means I get to then give them the options. So because I have a number of options in my work, I have the values-based decision-making, which for me is the most important tool on the landscape. It's basically helping people to understand what are the values of the project they want to be true, how do they want it to be in the future, and then helping them to evaluate decisions for those decisions' abilities to bring about how it will be in the future. And this is work that I retooled from Alan Savory and Dan Palmer. I made it a bit more accessible and a bit more specific to folks. I'll be offering another group course in this in the fall, and I do one-on-one work with folks all the time. There's also going to be a self-paced course that'll be available in a couple of weeks. So I tell them about that, usually if it's a large-scale design, and I say, my recommendation for anybody is to understand this process, but it's not necessary. Then I talk to them about how my first step is usually a feasibility study. And that feasibility study is, here's all our wants and needs, Javin, as a client. And I say, great, is it possible? So I usually do a survey. I do a deep dive in vegetation. I take a look at all the GIS outputs. I take a look at the regulatory issues in their area, see if what they want is possible. And then basically write a report, usually using Google Docs, only because it has that great interconnectivity. Used to do it with Word, but I really like Google Docs, especially as I bring in third-party editors to take a look at it, and sometimes apprentices and things like that, or folks that want to trade for mentorship. And then at that end of that feasibility study, they end up getting that feasibility study, usually in hard copy and digital. They get the maps, and there's usually a Google Earth profile, which is a working file. So it's organic. If there's any details, the details are usually either in the report, or if they're images that have been produced in the report, I've also added them into the Google Earth file as little pop-ups that can show them different areas. And then if they have requested a render, I will then either develop that render. I'm enjoying my time on Morpholio Trace more and more, so I'm enjoying my drawing, and it's a bit therapeutic. But if I don't have the time, I'll hire it out. And then at that point, we have what's called a concept plan. So it has generally the shape and the size of the landscape, generally what's possible, and really it's a report card in many ways. If they want detailed design, like they want plantings and heights and things of that nature, then we can go into that in a detailed design. And usually by the end of the feasibility study, I'll know what the detailed design cost is. But until that point, I don't really know. Jobs are priced upon the amount of effort it takes and the amount of interaction, and it's specific to each job. We could do an entire conversation about pricing and estimating. And then at that point, either they want me to install or they don't. More and more, I've been really enjoying working with clients in what Dan Palmer calls the living design process, which I've really been enjoying. And these are clients that just want a little bit of input, and then they'll bring you back in a little while and a little bit more input, and they'll bring you back again and a little bit more input. And it's more a living process of design where you're actively helping them, and you don't ever really focus on a big master plan. You usually do quite a bit of site analysis and survey and data collection and things of that nature, because those are the tools that we use to help read the landscape. But the result is you get a real nice connection with clients and a really nice flow with clients, which has been really enjoyable for me. So again, the business can be anything you want, and really do focus on making it your version of reality and your version of utopia. So thanks again for those questions. Any follow-up questions from anybody who's on the call?
Hey, John. Thanks for that. That was really, really interesting. I sent you the email about sort of like what your process has been. I can speak a little about what I sent you, what my sort of my questions were. You kind of covered some stuff, some of the motivation as well. So it may be interesting to hear from the group present and then also into the future because of how videos work, if this resonates. So the last set of assignments, assignment 8, had us picking an area and doing a kind of high level design for an area. That assignment in particular is kicking my tuchus. I'll say, I keep this PG. I think it's just the challenge to kind of like figure out how to get organized with like, local plants and, you're by a road. So you support salt, you can tolerate salt. And then, just figuring out how to get organized. Looking back at the process of going through the entire course, I see that a lot of the things we did are mimicking what you would actually do with a client. So you're doing your watershed, you're doing your base map, you're doing sort of all these things that are really important and necessary to understand the patient, if you will. But I'm curious about kind of like when it's just Javin alone, either walking the field or doing plant design or drawing up your contour maps, like I'm curious like how you actually do that work, because I can't in my head imagine, I was actually really surprised to hear you say this, that we're working in slideshow, so basically Google Slides, that we are using something like the Plant Capital database, which is really rich in information, but is very hard to kind of like keep organized because of some deficiencies in the website. So I'm curious to hear some of, I guess, highlights when you're working, you've got the good fit, you are doing the work. What tools do you use? How do you stay organized? And again, you touched on some of it because you did mention that you went from PowerPoint over to slides, a lot of Google Docs, which you like because a lot of things are related and you can link back to different links and projects, good for collaborators. Yeah, just really curious because to me, this process is very convoluted and hard to stay organized, particularly like even the plant stuff, like from this last assignment.
Yeah. So great questions, and I'll try and answer what I think what you're driving at. And if I veer off, just let me know.
For sure.
We'll start here. So this is Damian Newman's seminal image about design, and this says everything. Like between where like all you folks right now are, somewhere in the realm of this area. This is about where you guys are right now. So, oh my God, it's overwhelming, and there's plants and there's water I still have to think of, and oh right, there's sectors, and oh there's climate, and oh my God, how does anybody figure this out? So you're really here. And I would purport that by the end of this course, while you will have a concept design and ideally you're here, you're probably right here still, because you're still like, okay, I'm just learning, this is just new to me. And so part of it, and part of why I'm showing you this, is that so much of this is about getting a sense that this is a process of design and learning. And so it takes time, and it takes a lot of mistakes, and it takes a lot of repetition to get it right. And this is why post PDC, I recommend everybody reach out to friends and family members, local parks, group homes, folks that could absolutely use your input, but probably don't have the resources to pay for it, but they might have the resources to put it in the ground, to go and say, hey, I'm just out of this course. I really want to focus on food. I really want to focus on water. I really want to focus on pollinators. Whatever your focus is, and maybe it's all of those things, saying, but I need design projects. So could you be my project? And with it comes, I will do this work for free or cheap, as long as you put it in the ground and as long as I can continue to document and help this process along. That's been my number one recommendation. I wish I had spent more time focused on repetition immediately after my PDC. Instead, it was spread out over about 5-6 years. And I think, of course, this is just ideas, but a couple of the clients that I've been mentoring students that I've been mentoring after this course that come out in contract time with me. We've shrunk their learning time to about a year or 2 years before they're in a place where they're into full design and they're generally meeting their income needs. So I start there. The second thing in terms of ordering is the Keyline scale of permanence for all things agricultural. So that is the framework I use to structure my thoughts. If I'm taking in information about climate, I put it in there. If I'm picking up information about topography, I put it in there. And basically I have two forms. I have my rough notes, which is also my report. So I use them interchangeably, which is great, which means that all my notes go directly into my design process. So I've got my report, which is basically, there's a sort of an executive summary or executive design summary or concept summary. And then there's just the headings, climate, topography or geography, water, access, all the way down. And basically, as I'm picking up information, I'm putting it into both that report, sort of my note-taking document, and I'm also putting it into those folders that I have in Google Earth Pro. So any information I see, any things I see, and so if I'm going around and tagging with my phone and my GPS different areas and different regions, I'm usually putting in, is it a climate point? Is it a water point? Is it an access point? Because then when I get home and then I digitally sort all my information, I can quickly put them into my folders, or I'll put them directly into a site visit folder. So under Google Earth Pro, I've got my main heading, and then I've got site visits, and then I've got the permanence, and all that permanence goes in there. Once those are sorted in there, now comes the mucking about, now comes the chewing of the cud, where you're basically going back and forth in your mind going, okay, they want trees. Great. Trees need water. Trees need sun. Trees normally need between 10 and 12 hours of sun if they're a fruit or a stone fruit or something like that. Conifers need a little less. But they are going to need an inch of water, usually per week. Now, trees are great because they can take all that water up in a big event and they can tide themselves over for months. So as long as I know that they have that eventually, that's great. But when I'm starting off, they do need supplementary irrigation to about an inch a week. So do I have that in place? How am I going to put that in place? And this comes back to Brad Lancaster's conversation of plant the water. So are they on swales? Do they have access to hugels? Have I created supplementary water irrigation? Can I do that? Or do I have to then turn around if it's dry, it's on the top of a rock, they have no water, and go, hey folks, I've got some bad news for you, but it's a positive negative in that it's a positive because we figured out something we can't do on the landscape, negative because you want it. Trees are not for you. This is not a good fit. This is not a thing that you should be focusing upon. So recently I went to this client and they wanted to do a greenhouse. And it's a family friend, so and I was driving by and they said, sure. And I said, hey, just send me your address. So they did, and I looked at it on Google Earth, went through the timeline, went from the beginning to the end of what the shots were, took a look at the municipality's GIS service, and most places in North America have this. Took a look at that and basically made an assumption. I said, this is an assumption based on remote data, but of the three places you've indicated, location 2 and location 3, I think, are out. Location 1 looks promising. If I can't stop and see the place, then I think that's it. So I get there. The husband has not shown up on time. The wife is at home. The wife comes out and goes, yeah, he's not here. Can you talk to me? Can you show me a few things? I'm like, yeah, don't matter. So I'm walking around and she tells me that he wants an attached greenhouse. Now the problem with attached greenhouses is that they produce a lot of moisture. There's a lot of moisture that comes out of the plants. There's a lot of moisture in watering, and it's contained air. It's a piece of Tupperware. You can think of it that way. And generally, I don't recommend attached greenhouses because they produce moisture, and your house has a roof for a reason, so that way moisture doesn't get into your house. And as I was kind of doing some ballpark calculations in my head, I'm like, yeah, you're probably minimum with the cost of building right now. You're probably 35,000, and you're probably moving up from there. Here's another option called a freestanding high tunnel, which you can create out of chain link material fencing, chain link fencing material. You can use what's called top rail and line posts. Relatively easy to make up. We could put it together in 6 hours or less. Cost for 12 feet by 40 feet is going to be 22 to 2,500 bucks. If your HOA, homeowners association, doesn't like it, you can take it down, even though it is a temporary structure. This is one of the reasons why I like these, is that homeowners associations can be problematic and persnickety to start off with, and generally I avoid them. But you could do it this way. And so my process was to gently tell him, because he eventually showed up, was to tell him that his attached greenhouse idea was expensive, probably would damage his house, and because he'd never grown in a greenhouse before, kind of moving up to a Gibson guitar when you should just buy something from the local thrift shop and learn how to play first. So it was an easy way to get him into greenhouse work. So similarly, going back to the work that we were discussing, as I'm going back and forth, I'm basically trying to break the design in my head, right? And something I do, and I'm just going to say this because if I forget, I don't want to forget saying it to you, is that down the line, usually when I'm finished my design and I'm ready to present to the client, I present to one or two of my colleagues, and either we trade time or I pay them outright. And I say, why am I wrong? Just point blank, why am I wrong? You tell me why I'm wrong about this design. And because I'm so well prepared with the report and with the Google slide, or with the Google Earth Pro, they then have almost all the information. If I don't bring them on site, and I usually do, I'll usually bring one of them on site to look around. They then do what's called red team design. And they tell me, okay, well, here's the reasons why you're wrong. Here's what you did wrong. And sure enough, I had this amazing property and I thought I did a great job. This was very recently, I'm embarrassed to say, like within 5 or 6 years. And they were in a rainforest, the coastal rainforest, got somewhere in the order of like 1,800 to 2,200 milliliters of rain a year, which is wild, going on 2 meters of rain, 6 feet. But they had a very steep property and they were trying to raise chickens. And so we joked that we were trying to turn water into chickens. And I had made the assumption that the job was turning water into chickens, instead of pulling back, doing the holistic conversation, going, why chicken? Why not ducks? It's a wet environment. Like, you're immediately into wet fowl instead of dry fowl, right? Chickens originally came from northern India. They were called jungle fowl. They roosted in trees. So those moments of getting other people to proof your design, basically, did two things that were so important in my career. The first was humbled me like never before. And two, elevated my design that no amount of mentorship ever could. Because until you show somebody what you're thinking, you can't have somebody else go, what? Why are you doing that? That's crazy. So that's been a really important piece of my design process. So I'm sometimes embodying my buddy Brandon or Jamie or Neil or Natalie Kakasimu. Like I'm embodying their approach because I know a bit of who they are, and I kind of, the part of them that lives in me in memory and in emotion, we bring in and we have that sort of conversation with them. But basically the design process itself, Steve, is thematic. So basically I take a look at different areas, and I think I get into this in the final tutorials, is thematic, where and this is why I like using the iPad, because I'll take a screenshot of that Google Earth Pro overlay and then I'll draw. I'll basically go, okay, well, if this area is both a zone 2 and a hot and sunny, but further away from water and very far away from the house, it's not a zone 2. This is something that should probably go into a zone 3, zone 4. This is something that should do long-term crops. Does the client have any long-term crop aspirations? Yes, they do. Okay, cool. What is their aspirations? Well, they want berries and they want trees. Cool. What was their labor availability again? Oh, nothing. Okay, cool. Well, we're not doing berries. We're probably going to do trees, and we're probably going to do nuts, and we're probably going to do things that don't, and we're probably going to focus on mulching, right? We're probably going to focus on geotextile or cardboard, right? And that will be applied every 1 to 3 years of cardboard and geotextile. You leave it, you forget about it. So that's that process of going back and forth and bouncing back and forth. The plant understanding is you. You have to either dedicate yourself to learning plants and become a nerd, or you have to basically take back from there and say, I'm going to partner with somebody who is. So I had a client or student years ago when we were doing these cool 21-day PDCs down in Cuba, where it was a roving PDC where we'd start in Vedadetto and go to Sanctus Spiritus and end up in Santiago de Cuba. And we would do a design and installation at the end of the trip. And amazing student in the course was already an urban designer, Lindsay Meads. At the end of that course, she spoke city-anese, so to speak. She could speak to the city, could work with municipalities, was an amazing drafts person, but didn't know the plants. And so she found a company that did, I think it was called Big Sky Permaculture. And so they married their businesses together. They even had a marriage ceremony, and then they created Regenerate Designs, where she had those administration skills, and she was a great designer, but she didn't know the plant to put in the place. And so she gilded, just like we do with plants, she gilded with somebody else who was a plant geek, and in the process became more and more knowledgeable. In my situation, I basically hired that out until I knew that. So I would hire out people like Brandon and others and folks that knew those elements until I knew them and could start to work with them. And I still do that. So if I'm designing, funny enough, I had a design in Calgary where I was born, but I didn't start designing here. And while I know the plants here, I still hired somebody locally and I said, hey, take a look at this design. And they had I think they revised 30% of my plant list. They're like, for this, and this reason, I just won't do it. And so one of the reasons why we ask you in one of the final design assignments to go and reach out and see what the designers are around here is that we want you to have local resources. This is the great thing about permaculture. It gives you a total framework, and it gives you a total closet to hang all of these different suits, but you may not fit those suits for a number of reasons. They may not be interesting to you. You may not have interest in them. They may, there's all of that suitability aspect. So you may want to hire that out, which is something that I did for years and still do to this day. There's aspects of the work that there's just people who do it every single day and are better suited than I am, which is great because they get to take on that work. But that back and forth, Stephen, that chewing of the cud is the work of beating your head against a piece of paper and going, okay, let's go back to basics. What's the topography like? What's the zone like? What's the microclimate like? What's the water flow like? How close is it to the house? What does the client want? What does the client need? Okay, I'm going to try this and see if I can break this. Does this work? It's a logic puzzle in many ways. Does this fit here? No, it doesn't quite fit here. Okay, well, what if I put it someplace else? There was this great exercise we used to do in-person PDCs, where you would take all the elements that a client wanted on a piece of paper, that was the base map, and you would basically move them around, and you would physically just move them. Like you'd cut them out and you would move them around and try and see if there was a combination that made better sense. And this is where I think folks like Hatch and Seed Contracting, Taylor Krawcheck and Solera created this great system of putting the compost in the chicken coop. Like in this urban chicken coop, they put their 1 by 1 by 1 meter compost, and they find that they get compost in half the time. Well, not half, about 30% reduction in time, because the chickens are picking through that material, which they throw the chickens anyways, but it's in the compost bin and piled. They're defecating on that, so they get compost quicker. Brilliant. Like, just first time I'd ever seen it, totally brilliant. So part of that is sort of that moving around and seeing where that all fits. Generally, that order of operations, again, climate, topography, water, is a structured approach, because each one is more durable in time and takes more effort to change. So if you don't adhere to the rules of the climate of your area, it doesn't matter what you do with the topography. Oh, look at all the swales I put in. yeah, but you get like half an inch of rain every single 5 years. Like you're not going to get enough to make it worth it. And this brings up projects like the Albaida project that Neil Spackman worked on in Saudi Arabia, where they had to do something different. They had to work with rock dams, and they had to make sure that they caught every single drop of water, because it only, I think it was something like 2 or 3 inches of rain every 3 or 4 years. So it was a different approach. And so you have to become really good at looking at a landscape and going, what don't I know? And then going and seeking that information. And that's been my approach to it, is just banging my head against the keyboard, banging my head against the iPad, banging my head against the paper, and going, they want these things. This is obviously where they go. And that's what's so great about the SWOT analysis. I know people get frustrated by it, but it's like, if you come up with the same conclusions 21 times, your design is in front of you. Oh, I need to make a shelter belt. I don't have the money for it. Okay, I still need a shelter belt. So maybe now you're looking at transplanting, or putting out notifications or emails, either notifications for plants that'll pop up for free on different listservs, or Facebook Marketplace, or Kijiji, or Craigslist, or whatever those opportunities are, or making connections with people who are doing plant relocations. That greenhouse job I was just at a couple of days ago, I was I can't help it. Once you're there and you start looking around, you're like, so what are you guys doing over here? Because you see an area and you're like, well, that's ugly. And you see you're in a temperate eastern slopes of the Rockies boreal forest, and you're like, why don't you have any shrubs here? Why don't you have kinnikinnick? Why don't you have like all of these great shrubs that you should have? Oh, and all of a sudden they go, yeah, there's a native plant relocation happening this Saturday. It's like, you should go, and you should take between 10 and 15 different shrubs, and you should be planting them under these trees. That's the order of this operation. And that's why, and I remember you saying this, Stephen, like, why do we have to find the ecology of the place? Well, because it's the blueprint, right? It's the blueprint of the place. You have to understand the blueprint before you can move things around. So, but that takes time. My mentor, Brandon, literally, you can tell him a plant, common or Latin, he'll know the common or Latin. He'll know its growing zone, its range, its region. It's just ridiculous. And it was super intimidating, still is intimidating to this day, 13 years later, still intimidating, because I don't have that brain. I don't have that brain. I will work on a project, I'll work on the plants, and I have to keep copious numbers of lists and rely on things like the plant database to go back and go, right, it's this plant, it's this plant, it's all right, that one goes, yeah. It's just building that around. And a great book, Thomas Elpel, Botany in a Day. What I love about Botany in a Day, and Tom's a brilliant dude, if you look at that book, at least the version I have, and I talked to him about this, there's a little dot beside some of the plants. And the dot beside those plants are the plants that he has physically interacted with, seen, and knows how to grow. That dot is only there for him. It's not there for anybody else, because that book is a book for him that is just useful to other people. And that's what I love about this work, is you're actively building your comprehension, your understanding, your work, but it's yours. And so I would say, enjoy the struggle. Reach out for help when you find knowledge gaps that you can't surmount. Use frameworks like the Keyline scale of permanence. That changed my entire design process dramatically a good 7-8 years ago. Just revolutionized it, because now all of a sudden I had a place to hang all my hats. And basically step into design in a way that goes, okay, I'm going to have to bounce back and forth. I'm going to have to work in a spiral, like, okay, what's the water like? What's the soil like? What's the plant need? What's the soil? What's the water? Like, it's this big spiral that comes over and over and over, because you're always bouncing back and forth. You're always checking and seeing. And then when you get to a place of like, wow, actually that tree's perfect, but the soil's not, okay, well, is it worth it to change the soil for the tree? Okay, well, now we're into what's called bill of quantities, which is, how much is it going to cost for me to move that soil, which is an estimating conversation, a budgetary conversation, where then if you don't know that element, you call up an excavator and say, hey, I need to move insert your units here. Most excavator drivers in North America will not work in volume, they'll work by hour, but they will generally know in terms of linear feet and depth what they can move, which then you can get volume. Places like Australia and Europe, they know volume, and you can basically say for cubic meter moved, what the cost would be. But in North America, we have to do a little bit more of addition and go, okay, great. If I want this whole section dug up and moved around, it's generally going to be 10 hours. It's $100 an hour. It's $1,000. Okay, cool. What are these trees worth? Okay, cool. So to make these trees have passive water harvesting and to move this all about, it's going to be $1,000 of earthworks. It's going to be $450 of trees. Cool. Now we go back to the client. Here's what the costing is. Is this of interest? So it's a back and forth and a back and forth. Usually I get all that up front, so I become the advocate for the client. And I'll finish with this because I know we've gone over time. Is I'm an advocate for the land first. So first and foremost, I'm looking at the land going, what does this land naturally, natively want to be? Okay, great. Once I get a sense of that and understanding of that, and that takes time, you have to fall in love with landscapes. You have to fall in love with this earth. So for me, at least, if I would say if that's not of interest to you, you're probably not going to go into design full time. You're probably going to find an area of this that you enjoy, which is fine. Once you have a sense of that, once you're an advocate for the land, I'm an advocate for my client's money second. So second, I want my client's money to be well spent. Notice how I haven't even gotten to their wants yet. So one, what does the land want to be? Two, what is the approach to the money? And I remember years ago, I had this client where I designed a road that was also water capture and had a beautiful reveal. So if you're interested in placemaking and land, Christopher Alexander's work is phenomenal and essential. Timeless way of building and a pattern language are the two that I recommend. Pattern language, probably as an introduction over timeless way of building, only because you can open it to any pattern and read it. And unfortunately, he passed a couple of weeks ago. And in that, we had this road that would reveal, and it was on contour, and it was going to take a lot of time to maintain. It was in the forest. And it was cheaper. And the client said, no, it was German. It's like, a road must be straight. There must be trees on either side. That is a good road. It's like, that's a road that crosses two wetlands and is going to be 4 times as expensive. Yes, but that is how it's supposed to be. I said, well, where'd that idea come from? Well, when I was a little boy, I had a little book about a little farm. And the farm had a little road, but it was straight. It had trees on either side. People will know it's a good farm. Your eyes get wide and you're like, well, you do what you want. It's your money, but I like your money and I like the land. And here's what works with the land. And here's where your money should go. Up to you. And so that then becomes also a piece that we need to adopt. We need to become advocates and we need to realize the scope of what we can do. Like, I'm not there to change a client's mind. I'm there to tell them what I think, and it's up to them if they want to use it. And so developing a sense of indifference is important. If you get into this work to save the world, you need to dramatically rethink your approach. And I say that honestly because I did. I got into this work to save the world and it burnt me out and I was done with it. I did a lot of internal work. I realized that I was externalizing my sense of happiness and well-being, and instead really came back to a place of, I do this because I love this work. I do this because I love working with certain types of clients, and then I go and seek those clients out. That's what got me into a lot of the life design work and a lot of the limiting beliefs, behaviors, and patterns work, which now shockingly makes up a huge portion of my work because other designers like me were dealing with the same thing. So that's what I would do, Stephen, is I would get a good system. I would use the Keyline scale of permanence. If you want to just completely steal my approach, please do. And then, take the Bruce Lee approach, take the best, leave the rest, add something uniquely your own. And then slowly build upon that to where it's like, okay, I know what I do in step 1, and then step 2, and then step 3, and then step 4, and then step 5. And I can process that equally. And then when I get to the plants, and I'm like, the plant database again. Reach out to somebody local, and you've got some great designers in and around your area, in and around that New York, New Jersey area. There's some great folks who just, are stupendous. It's like, cool, I'm going to pay for their time to take a look, to learn from them, or to basically hand, that section of the design over to them saying, listen, I know you're busy. I want to show up with value. I don't want to take up your time. Whatever you cost per hour, please help. Here's what I've got. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Or, reach out to other students in this class that seem to be further ahead of you in that process and see what their thoughts are. Start to create these little student guilds or these, working entrepreneurship guilds that you're going to be working together with. So many ways to go about it, but generally that's what I do.
Awesome. You've given me a lot to think about. My thought to immediately go to throw software at it, because that's kind of what I do, right? That you make uniquely your own is just like, we can organize these things and make this like, store the ones that are for this project. So I'm not storing like a plant database ID inside of like a spreadsheet somewhere and trying to remember why this tab is open in the first place. Like this is where my head goes. I like the organizing principles. I like the looking at the Keyline permanence hierarchy to stay organized. There are some parts of this process that I think software could help, and I want to take a stab at some of those. My only concern is I want this cert, and these assignments got to get done. So I gotta figure out how to
go roughly right. Just go roughly right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
I can do that.
If you put a rough design down and you make every note of why something isn't there, I'll give you marks. Right. Like my approach to this is I want you to succeed. I want you to come to the end of it. I want you to go, okay, great. I've gone through this once. It's not perfect. Right. It's not like what I'd hand a client. It's an educational course. It shouldn't be, like what you do in this course. It's not an advanced course. It's not a, it's a pro course in that we're setting you up to go about and do it again. Right. Whereas the regular course was not that. It was people who just wanted to understand about permaculture, which is great. But when I developed that template, the feedback I got from students, because in year one, when we offered it was like, whoa. Like, how much are we doing? And there was a bunch of people who were thinking, my goodness, I just wanted to learn about permaculture. I'm not going to become a designer. And because of what I do, because I do this full time, I developed what I thought I would want moving back there. Right. So yeah, I think software can help. Like the plant lists I made up were in spreadsheets that I could then sort by all of the different metrics. So I could quickly bring them up. They all had tags of like upper story, lower story, ground cover for my biome. So they're not very useful. Right. Else that were there. And then when I discovered things like the natural capital plant database, I was like, oh, somebody's already done this. Okay, I don't need to develop my database anymore. But I'm potentially going to be moving to a new biome. And so now all those skills are coming back up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start developing another database because that's important, right?
What is new biome? Sorry, I think I missed that.
What's that?
You said you're moving to a new biome in like a new area, or is that?
Can't reveal that yet.
Oh, secrets. You heard it here first, folks. New biome. Check it out.
Thinking about.
Okay.
Thinking about. We're evaluating that. But I realized the other day as we were evaluating that, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to learn a new ecosystem. That's cool.
Yeah.
And that's where the like love of ecosystems, like, why is this happening? And oh, look at these.
Right.
God, look at the insects.
And what's native and how do they interact? And there's a lot.
Again, back to the indigenous people that were there, and it's like, oh my God, they had amazing agriculture. And now you're into such a bigger conversation, right? And that's what's so like for me, for a lifelong learner and a hungry mind, permaculture has been fantastic. It's like, here's something you can go into forever and you can never find the bottom. That was my realization when I was sitting in my first PDC and they gave me the prime directive, ethics, and the 12 principles that Holmgren laid out. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like I could dive into for the rest of my life. So
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot here. I think the fight to not get overwhelmed is a constant one, but thanks for the feedback. Thanks for giving me something to think about. I'll make sure I add you to the beta if whatever I come up, maybe it'll make the potential move to a new biome a little bit easier.
You got her, man. You got her. And if you ever want to work together, let me know. That'd be fun.
Awesome.
I've had a couple of projects where I've had programmers who are like, oh, I want to make this. And it's like, great, let's do it. And then they lose interest and do something else and go back to programming full time. So I get that. I'm waiting for that unicorn that's like, no, they're really stoked and they want to transfer tools. So if you ever want to chat about it, let me know.
Awesome.
Okay, so we are over, but I do want to do a little coming attractions moment of the next assignment. So if folks got to go, that's fine. I just want to make sure it's recorded. and we'll jump in. So we are into our coming up to our final couple of conversations. And so this week we've got our building survey, and building survey is really fascinating. And a lot of people dissuade or discard it because they don't think it's relevant. But what I have come to realize about the Indigenous population within the areas that we live, and for those of us that are in populations where the Indigenous people looked like us, because that's possible too, and sometimes we get a little bit mono-continental about this, is that there are some amazing ways of building and processing that they've worked with. And there's an amazing amount we can learn from them. And I think probably the main thing I've learned from pretty much every Indigenous culture that I've studied, and now many others, because being an instructor here is just such an embarrassment of riches of aggregated information, is that in this conversation, I have learned that nomadic or mobile infrastructure is worth its weight in gold. And this is what folks like Mark Shepard and Jeff Lawton and Joel Salatin and Rosemary Morrow and the Francises, the Robins have all come to understand as well, is that being able to move infrastructure around is really important because life is always changing. So that's been a really important piece in how that might help us. And so that's an important piece. Once we get to Zone 1 integrated design, now this is important. Zone 1 is really about the area around the center of human initiative. So if your site doesn't have a house yet, you can just say, okay, generally we park our car here and this is where we're thinking about. So if it doesn't have a place where a home's going to be, that's fine. If you generally think where the zone is going to be, or part of this Zone 1 integrated design is you determining where that Zone 1 will be, great. For a lot of folks that are using community gardens or community spaces or things like that, or places where people kind of gather in community space, that'll be that Zone 1 area. How do you enter? How do you exit? So here's design site with Zone 1 highlighted. So we've got our highlighted area, highlighted zone, which is great. Just kind of shows us that area that we're focusing on, gives us that sense. Then we get into some different areas that we're going to focus on. So what are those areas? What is that focus? Some close-up of the map overlays, showing things like microclimate or zones, maybe some cross sections there. And then similar to what we've seen in the plant design, we're going to basically make a goal and show the patterns and strategies. So as you get into this, you'll get into what is this little area. This was a tiny house that the student was working on. We've got a bigger map. We've got a call out and a close up. Now within here, we've got this little area in here. And basically, and I love this about this example, is that they put all the different patterns. Instead of saying what the design was going to be, it's like, well, we need shade, summer shade canopy, outdoor living area. We want this to be a sight line that we want to keep. This is a sight line we want to keep. This is an outdoor living room. Something I used to do when I was doing this work is I would put a plus or minus beside each of these things, just so it's like, this is the thing and I want more of this or I want less of this. Don't have to do that if you don't want to. But over here, we've got the patterns. What are the different patterns? What are the strategies that we're thinking of? Well, we want to block that, extend the season. We want to improve. Sometimes we might even get into the strategy itself, like we're thinking a shelter belt or something of that nature. Then we get into water strategies. So what are the water strategies here? So basically in this map, what I want to see is exactly how the water is going to flow. How is it going to flow? What is the flow over this? And remember, if you hold water in anything, a swale, a hugelkultur, a pot, a pan, a rain barrel, you have to show me where the overflow goes. Do not submit an assignment that doesn't show me where the overflow doesn't go. So you need to show me where that overflow is going to go until it goes off-site. Then again, we've seen this before, Zone 1 design. And again, use grayscale for pre-existing elements. This is where that grayscale map comes into play. And then show us the new elements. Proposed design plan. So again, if you need something else that shows a couple of different little elements, things you're thinking about, examples, remember you have to show access dates and URLs. So this was espalier fencing, which is super beautiful. This is using cattle panels and putting them over to an upward trellis fence. This was a great little cross section of a hugel down here that they put together, just kind of showing generally what they're going to look like and the heights of things. Brilliant. And then another big focus on zone 1 is energy systems and conservation strategies. So something that we do in a lot of permaculture is really focusing on energy. How is that energy going to be used, and can it be used better? So if you're in a cold climate, this is about insulation, this is about moisture. If you're in a warm climate, this is about ventilation and usually about different types of cooking strategies. So we want you to take a thought about that, a process about that, and start to show different examples of what that design looks like. And then you may just go directly into that proposed plan, which I think is this one here. So this is a great example to show. So here we have a fully articulated and abbreviated legend showing all the different elements, where those elements are, where they are down here, and the different elements above here, what those areas are, what the pathways are. I remember when this came in, the pathways were directly downslope from each other, which is a surefire way to get a channelization of flows. So she offset them, so that way there'd be a little bit of interruption and friction for that water. But we want to give a bigger and a better sense of this. And then SWOT analysis. And SWOT analysis is you saying, what are the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats of your design? So this is now you playing red team design. How does your design operate? What are the strengths of it? What is it still missing? What are the threats impacted by it? We want you to really think about it in that way. Other questions about that? Is that pretty straightforward for folks? C'est bon? Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Nice to see you showing up. Stephen, I've had an idea that I want to chat with you about, so I'm going to send you an email about it.
Awesome.
And we'll see you in the next one in a couple of weeks. Again, enjoy the time, play with your designs. If there's something that you're not getting, just take a note of or reach out. Happy to help. You don't need to bang your head against the keyboard too hard. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye now.
Take care.